Hi, welcome back to Sewing Street Tutorials. I'm Sophie from Sew Sophie Crafts, and in this video we'll be talking about 3 different methods you can use to finish your cross stitch project. There are various different ways you can finish your cross stitch. I quite like how they look within the embroidery hoop, so this is a nice easy way to finish off the stitching if you want to keep it in the hoop. So to begin with, I've got a piece of plain just cotton fabric which is going to be used to cover up the back of my stitching. However, you can choose to leave the back of your stitching open if you would prefer that. This just covers it up if you would rather. So to begin with, I'm going to take the Ada out of the hoop, lay it onto just the plain cotton fabric. You could also use patterned fabric if you wanted. Lay both of those sheets of fabric over the hoop, and we're basically putting it back into the hoop but with that additional sheet of fabric in there as well. So it's nice and neatly covered up at the back, and then once you're happy with the positioning, you can tighten up that screw again. You want to make sure that's really nice and tight so the fabric isn't going to move around while you're finishing the project. So I'm going to take my fabric scissors and trim around. So I'm going to trim this cotton fabric quite close to the hoop. And then the excess Ada, I'm just going to trim the corners away. Next, I'm going to take a length of thread. For this, I will normally use any leftover thread from a kit that I'm using or random little pieces that I have laying around. It's a really good way to use up spare parts. I've threaded all 6 strands onto this needle, and then I'm going to use a running stitch to go all the way around the hoop. So remember to leave a tail of thread at the end. It doesn't have to be a particularly neat stitch because it's going to be on the back of your hoop anyway. Run your stitch around the outside of your fabric, and then when you get to the end, pull both ends together and it will gather all of the fabric inside the hoop. So I'm just going to tie this in a knot. And then you can trim the ends, and it keeps all of the excess fabric out of sight so you can hang your lovely cross stitch hoop onto a wall. Another way to finish your cross stitch is to make it into a card. Here I have an aperture card which has an insert in it that will cover up the back of your stitching as well. So what I've already done is cut my stitching to size so it's going to fit within the card, and then all you need to do is around the aperture is just add some double-sided tape. And then lay your stitching central. The good thing about double-sided tape is that if your stitching isn't quite central, you can peel it off and reposition, and it will still stick through there. So once you're happy with the positioning of your cross stitch in the circle, I'm just going to add some double-sided tape across these edges as well. And that will then cover up the back of your stitching and create your card. You can also mount your cross stitch onto a piece of foam board, which is an alternative to framing. For this project, I've chosen a small design that I'm going to mount on a 4-inch square piece of foam board. So this is an A4 sheet that I've got here. So I'm going to mark where I need to trim it to size. So I've got 4 inches here, and then score across. I'm just going to use a pair of scissors to do this. So that then creases where I've scored that line, and then I'm just going to trim across. And then mark this side at 4 inches where I'm going to trim this side. And use that line to mark where I need to finish trimming here. And there is my 4-inch square. My 4-inch square of foam board ready to mount my cross stitch. I would normally mark the centre of my stitching with a pencil, or roughly where I feel the centre is, and then measure out. So my foam board is 4 inches, so I'm going to measure out 2 inches in each direction, so I know that the stitching is in the centre. And just mark it. It's on the back of the stitching, so it's not going to show on the front. And then when you lay your foam board over your fabric, you can make sure that it is fairly central to where your stitching is. I have these glass-headed sewing pins, and I'm going to put one in the centre this side. And then fold up fabric on this side as well, making it fairly tight, but not pulling it too much. So you can see that's relatively central, and at this point if you need to shuffle the fabric over and start again you can. So I'm also going to pull the fabric and add in 2 extra pins here, and then do the same on the other side. Then I'm going to take some masking tape and tape down those edges to keep them neat. And then you can fold the same with these edges. So I'm just going to tuck that in the corner slightly and add a pin in the centre. And again in the centre here. And then you can start going along the edges, get those final pins in, so you end up with 3 on each side. And then once I've got my 3 pins on that side, I'm just going to tape that edge down. And then you can trim the sides here so they don't show from the front. And then finally pin that last edge. So here's a larger one I've done with more pins along the top and then 3 down each side, taped into place, and then the same with a smaller one. Once they are taped, if you're happy with how they've stuck down, you can remove the pins if you prefer. However, for these ones, I've colour matched to complement the thread shades, so it is completely up to you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, and head over to our channel for more crafting tutorials.